Today, we're diving into a landmark human rights case. This was a moment when one country actually sued another over its treatment of its own citizens. It's a case that forced the world to draw a line in the sand on a question we are still wrestling with today.
And it all really boils down to this one incredibly difficult question. Where exactly is the line between tough interrogation and actual torture? A European court tried to provide a definitive answer, and believe me, that decision has been echoing for decades.
So to really get a grip on how we even got here, we have to go back in time. We need to understand a period of intense, violent conflict in Northern Ireland, known simply as the Troubles.
Okay, so by the late 60s, tensions in Northern Ireland were just boiling over. Then, in 1971, the British government made a huge decision. They introduced internment. This basically gave them the power to detain suspected paramilitaries without ever putting them on trial. And that policy, it led directly to something called Operation Demetrius, where hundreds were arrested, including a group of men who would soon become infamous as the Hooded Men.
And what happened to some of these men during their interrogation? Well, that became the absolute heart of this entire legal firestorm. The methods used on them became known as the 5 techniques. Now, when you see this list, it almost sounds kind of clinical, doesn't it? But make no mistake, when you use these 5 techniques together, they were designed for one thing: deep sensory disorientation, to completely break a person's will. Forcing people into painful stress positions for hours, putting a hood over their head, blasting them with continuous loud noise, and on top of all that, depriving them of sleep, food, and water.
You can imagine the revelation that a modern Western democracy was using these methods on its own people. It caused an absolute uproar. And in response, the Republic of Ireland took a step that no one saw coming.
And this is what was so groundbreaking. It was literally the first time ever that one country took another to the European Court of Human Rights, not for some border dispute, but for how it was treating its own people. This was a massive test for international law.
So the case wasn't really about if the UK had violated human rights. It was pretty clear they had. The really crucial question was, what do you call it? Did these techniques actually rise to the level of torture?
The entire legal battle hinged on these few words from Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights. It seems so simple, right? No one shall be subject to torture or to inhuman or degrading treatment. But the court's immense task was to figure out the difference between those two things.
And here's the incredibly fine line they drew. The court basically said that inhuman treatment is anything that causes intense suffering. But torture, well, that's a step beyond. It's a deliberate, worse form of that treatment, and it's done to achieve a specific goal, like getting a confession. And, this is key, the court said the word torture carries a special stigma that should only be used for the most severe cases.
So how did it all play out? Well, first, an investigatory body called the European Commission looked at the case, and they concluded, yep, the 5 techniques were torture. But then, the case went to the higher European Court, and they disagreed. In their final ruling in 1978, they said the techniques were inhuman and degrading, but they did not meet that strict definition of torture.
And that verdict, inhuman but not torture, that's exactly why we are still talking about a case from the 1970s. Because that ruling didn't just end there. It created a legal ripple effect that we are still feeling today.
Its legacy is just massive and so complex. On the one hand, hey, it banned these 5 techniques for the British Army, and it proved that powerful nations could be held accountable. That's a good thing. But on the other hand, by ruling that this wasn't torture, it created a legal gray area that was later cited in arguments for enhanced interrogation techniques during the War on Terror. It created a loophole with really profound consequences.
But there was one thing the court was absolutely crystal clear about, and you see it in this quote. They said that the right to be free from this kind of treatment is absolute. Period. You can't strike a balance. You can't say, well, national security requires it. The ban is total.
So we're left with this crucial, nagging point. The court drew a line in the sand, but it was a line that many people found, and still find, deeply troubling. It leaves us with a provocative and vital question to think about today. If that combination of hooding, stress positions, and deprivation wasn't torture, then what is?